How are you, John Chambers?
I'm well. I've had a lovely, relaxing Christmas here with my mum and dad and our little dog Marlowe, who is a treat. And he owns all of our socks and slippers, so that's been a problem. But apart from that, it's been lovely.
And to describe Marlowe, he's a sort of bundle. He's that kind of dog, isn't he? Just
He's more a blur than a specific form. Um, if he stands still for long enough, you can make out features, but that's about it.
good. So, tell me how you became involved in the project of working on the project of It Is Better.
So initially, you approached me with a view to just recording your voice, your vocal performance of the piece, um, and I made it clear that my facility is a small brick building in my parents' garden. It's about two outdoor toilets large, I think is how I would describe the capacity. And I said, if that's okay with you, then we can absolutely you can come on over and do that with a view to then looking at what came out of that session and then seeing what else, if anything, it needed.
Yes, I think from my point of view, it was always. I think it was a sort of what's the word? A ruse. I had always planned to trick you into doing sounds for it as well. I just needed to test the water, ease into it.
It was a very
Um,
successful ruse.
rather,
You
well,
had me
thank you,
fooled.
thank you. Yeah, you just thought I wanted to drive to wherever you live, which I won't mention, so that people don't come and burgle you uh, and sit in a brick building. When it came to writing the music for the album, what were your main inspirations?
It was a combination of inspirations. You sent over some rather interesting reference material, which I drew from. I was particularly interested in the Vivian Stanshall, Sir Henriette Rawlinson end, which I hadn't been familiar with before. Not necessarily from a musical stylistic standpoint. The music on that album is, I would call it, a kind of off kilter bluesy folk music. It sort of feels like bits are falling off the instruments some of the time, which is lots of fun. But I think that album is a great example of how music can function within what is essentially a spoken word piece as a sort of connective tissue.
Oh, that's nice connective tissue. Oh, or can I suggest mortar that holds together the bricks of the uh, of the spoken word?
You can suggest mortar. Thank you for that. Um, so that was a key influence, and we also talked a little bit about how Zach Galifianakis uses music when he's doing stand up, or rather sit down at the piano, and gently accompanies himself with a kind of jazzy improvising chordal figuration type texture. Um, and then in terms of other influences that I brought to it, I think I was just in a very. I think you mentioned that you wanted it to sound quite cozy.
You mentioned a beautiful day in the neighbourhood.
Oh yes, yeah, that was the other thing. Yeah, the music of Mister Rogers.
Well, in fact, the first thing you mentioned was, "Oh, I can see this having the music from Don't Look Now." You said, "Oh, like a Don't Look Now thing," and I thought, "Oh, right, okay." Well, I can't remember because I'd watched it quite recently, and I couldn't remember what it was like. And I thought, well, yeah, happy to go with that. Let's see what that synth music is. And then it turned out you'd meant Look Around You. So you hadn't meant the 70s horror classic. You were talking about the noughties comedy classic.
That's right. They are slightly different
They are.
pieces, aren't they?
I'm sure there are. There's a lot in common between comedy and horror. The unusual coping with the odd and the absurd, whether that's something that's going to jump out and slit your throat, or something that's going to make you laugh. Yeah, good. Now, in terms of the soundscapes, what's the oddest thing you found yourself doing?
The oddest thing I found myself doing for the soundscape is trying to imagine what a tiny Elton John might sound like. And then the second oddest thing was trying to imagine what a tinier baby Elton John might sound like.
I must say, I wasn't expecting to hear the tiny Elton John. I was very pleased when I did, and then delighted to get the tinier Elton John in. Could you talk me through how you made the sound of a tiny Elton John?
Hours of preparation. You know, I'm a Stanislavski man,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of objectives and super objectives were involved. Yeah, I really had to inhabit the part for a few hours.
It's interesting because to the untrained ear, it sounded a bit like you'd just gone hello into a microphone and then maybe altered the pitch.
Yeah, that's right. You would think that. You would think that. But no, it was far more elaborate.
It's like a swan, isn't it? There's desperate paddling going on under the surface, but it just on the top, it's just going hello. You know?
That's right.
All the work you did. What would you rate the album out of 10?
That's a great question. I think it's a 10. I genuinely think it's a beautiful piece of work, ignoring for a moment any and all of my contribution to it.
But your contribution is essential. It's what I realised. The choice, you sent me the second half recently, and we ended on something very silly, and sort of realised as I was listening to it that particular punchline at that particular time cheapened the thing a bit, because actually the music and it sounded so beautiful to me, and I thought it was odd. It's odd as a comedian to go, let's cut that laugh for the integrity of this comedy album. But you've really done something very beautiful with all of the sounds that you've put on and over it. So thank you for that.
That's very, very kind of you to say. I think all I would say on that subject is, if anything, all I've done really is maybe draw out and underline some of the slightly more serious themes, and I think that earlier idea I had of doing something quite light and synthy and a bit 70s and a bit silly, I think was a response to the surface level of absurdity. But on further listens, there is some quite sort of dark and heartfelt thematic stuff bubbling under the surface. I think particularly that return to the dad's deathbed for a moment of connection that happens, I think, 3 times throughout the piece, has the potential to be quite moving at the same time as being very funny.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't think that they're in any way exclusive of each other. And in actual fact, they kind of help each other. You know, laughter's the release of tension. So, you know, we laugh when we're released from an emotion, and a difficult emotion maybe. And I think that means you can use it in quite a... you can deal with real... You know, humour is not separate to the emotional and to the experience of living and to all the rest of it. In fact, they're entirely connected together. The interesting thing is when you decide not to release the tension, and I sort of think that's what we've done at the end of the album, to leave the audience in what I think is quite a warm, bittersweet, maybe thoughtful place. I think I really hope that when people finish the album, they're near the end of their whiskey or non-alcoholic substitute, and they really get a good night's sleep. I think after listening to the album, you should get a good night's sleep.
That's the tagline right there.
Well, yeah, but not during it. It's not like 5 minutes in, you're off. I mean, like
Yeah.
half an hour after.
That's too early.
I'm not. It's not. I wouldn't splash soporific on the front of the album. I don't think.